This is CBC Here and Now.
We are just 1 hour away from the leaders' debate live from our CBC studio in St. John's tonight. The three leaders face off, see where they stand on the issues that matter to you. It all starts at 7 o'clock Island time. Also tonight.
I was invited to go down there. I just wanted to make sure that I certainly paid my way to get in there and those that were with me.
Skategate. Dwight Ball denies claims his party swapped free seats to a skate show in exchange for a government grant.
Be transparent, talk to us like we're all adults, just be straight up and listen to us.
And in the second half of Here and Now, Undecided, a new series all about voters. The first episode is all about election apathy and what makes for a good leader.
And I'm Carolyn Stokes in for Ashley tonight. A real mixed bag of precipitation on the way, but so far Saturday is looking really nice for the island. I'll have all the details coming up.
Well, good evening and welcome to Here and Now. I'm Anthony Germain, live from our newsroom, as you can tell, as our CBC NL team prepares for the leaders' debate. But first, let's get to our top story. Now, no parent wants to see their child in the Janeway intensive care unit, and tonight, a mother is sounding the alarm about staffing levels there. The nurses union calls it a crisis, and that has Eastern Health on the defensive. Here and Now's Terry Roberts reports.
Some damning criticism of the Janeway's ICU.
It's uncalled for, it's wrong to do that to staff, and it's unsafe for the patients.
This unit, I believe, is in crisis.
So Eastern Health made these two VPs available today.
I'm here to reassure the public that if your child needs the services and care, we will be able to provide it.
There haven't been any staffing cuts to this unit.
For the first time in a decade, some young patients were sent out of the province for care last month because of a nursing shortage. And some ICU nurses were also required to work 24-hour shifts.
Is this an unsafe situation?
You ask anyone, if you're on hour 23 of a 24-hour shift, do you think you're safe? Your answer has to be no.
This mother says she noticed something very troubling last month when her daughter was receiving care.
Even though there were 3 empty beds in the PIC unit at that time, there was no nurse to look after a child in those beds, so the child was shipped away instead.
Richards says she noticed something else.
Over the course of 13 days, there were 4 24-hour shifts that had to be pulled by those nurses in that time.
The ICU has 6 beds, staffed by 4 very specialized RNs per shift, a ratio Eastern Health says is consistent with national standards. But when the Janeway got especially busy last month, there weren't enough nurses to backfill those on leave, and extreme measures had to be taken.
We don't want any nurses working 24 hours. We do our best to try and prevent that from happening.
It doesn't happen frequently, which we're very, very happy to say. And when it does, we work to make sure that we can still provide safe care.
The nurses union says the issue has been on their radar for months.
I'm just flabbergasted and appalled that these RNs are looking for help, and all that they can do is say, we're meeting staffing standards as other places in the country.
Forward says the answer is to increase the number of nurses.
Wouldn't a better plan be to staff for a higher rate, so you're not paying overtime, so you're not forcing people to work 24 hours?
Eastern Health says that's about to happen. The health authority says some newly hired nurses will start work later this month. Terry Roberts, CBC News, St. John's.
Well, to the campaign trail today, where NDP leader Alison Coffin took aim at staff shortages in hospitals as well as health centres. Coffin was at Jen Dion's campaign headquarters, and there she told reporters that her party wants to hire more full-time staff. Coffin said inadequate frontline staffing levels are affecting patient care in hospitals as well as long-term care centres.
Absolutely everywhere. You're going to see it in emergency rooms, you're going to see it in the long-term care facilities. So if you were going to visit your grandmother in the seniors complex, you would see the staffing shortages there. You would see it in the ORs. We've seen surgeries canceled. You've seen it in the children's facilities at the Janeway. Absolutely everywhere this is prevalent.
Now to an important developing story on the Labrador coast. A small plane has crashed near Makovic, and police say the plane was a personal aircraft carrying 2 people. A search is currently underway for the people who were on that plane. The RCMP say they will release more information as that becomes available.
Time now for a quick look at your weather forecast, starting with your weather on the way headline. So we do have this mixed bag of precipitation coming for most of the island for the next couple of days. Once Lab West gets through the flurries tonight, then they're in for a mostly cloudy day tomorrow and tomorrow evening. A mild Saturday also coming for the island on the weekend. So this is how things are shaping up tomorrow. On Thursday, some flurries along the coast of Labrador there in southeastern Labrador. And you can see the flurries changing over to some showers on the island. So there's going to be that mix of flurries and then some showers and some sunshine mixed in there as well. For St. John's, looking at 3 degrees as the high tomorrow. Temperature's not too bad on the whole island tomorrow, between 3 and 7 degrees. For Labrador along the coast, fairly messy day coming there. Lab City looking at a cloudy day and a high of 0. I'll get into your weekend weather forecast a bit later.
More now on the ice show ticket controversy in Marystown. As Here and Now reported, MHA Mark Brown says he bought dozens of tickets at the direction of the Premier to see Caitlin Osmond last year. Now, an email from Brown's assistant suggests more than 30 tickets were obtained in exchange for a $1,500 grant, and that's money the club says it never asked for. Well, Ball says he paid Brown back for his own ticket.
I ordered the tickets through Mark, and that was money that I would have given to Mark. He paid for those tickets for me. I think there's a statement that came out today from the department that explained, from what I know, from what I've seen, is that the grant money that went there was not for payment of tickets.
Here's the statement Dwight Ball mentioned. There was no funding request for tickets, and the approved funding allocation does not include funding for show tickets. Now, that statement, by the way, comes from Lisa Dempster's department, and Dempster was at Osmond's event with all the other Liberals. But what nobody has addressed in this story, not the Premier, not the department, or Mark Brown, the MHA who bought the tickets at the direction of the Premier, are 2 emails. They're from Mark Brown's assistant, Tara Plank, sent to the local Ice Crystals Skating Club, the group that was selling the tickets for the ice show. In one, Ms. Plank says the provincial government is looking for 30 tickets to the ice show. And she wrote, as mentioned on the phone, there will be some monetary donations being given to the Ice Crystals Skating Club from the government. But it's Plank's second email that's harder to reconcile. With the extra funds that we can secure for the club, the granting of these tickets will be more than covered from a monetary perspective. And note, it's the granting of these tickets, not the buying or purchasing, but granting, that is linked to the extra funds from government. Now, about that $1,500 grant, CBC News asked to see the skating club's application for that grant, but there is none. The money came out of the blue, the club never asked for it, so there's no paper trail. As for Mark Brown, he says he paid for those 34 tickets at the direction of the Premier, but it was a personal expense, so no receipts, again, no paper trail. The skating club rationed tickets for the show, only 5 tickets per skater for their friends and family. But the MHA bought almost 7 times that limit, 3 dozen for the Premier, cabinet ministers, and other Liberals to share with their families. Now, one point about this story I want to make perfectly clear. Caitlin Osmond is not involved in this ticket distribution story in any way whatsoever. The local Ice Crystals Club that hosted the ice show, that was their thing, and Caitlin was simply a part of that show. Now, some great news about her, the figure skating star. She'll skate at Mile 1 on November the 23rd, along with many other great Canadian skaters. Now, tickets for this event, it's called Rock the Rink Tour. It goes on sale this Friday at noon. Now, the Liberals called a press conference today to criticize the Tories' plan on women's issues. They say the Blue Book covers violence prevention and gender equity in just a few sentences. But the PC say their platform is comprehensive.
The reality is we do have a glass ceiling. We do have work to do in ensuring that both women can rise in leadership roles in our province and most importantly, are not subjected to any violence in our communities.
I don't think we need to get into tallying up how many times any book mentions women or gender policy. I think you have to take all of the policies in context, and I think in its entirety the Blue Book is really strong on policy that supports women's issues, gender issues, and issues that address vulnerable demographics.
To other news now, the man accused of killing Chantel John in Conn River faces 6 new charges. Kurt Keeping appeared by video link in Grand Falls Windsor Court this morning. The additional charges include 2 counts of uttering threats, impaired driving, and breach of probation. This in addition to the first-degree murder charge in John's death, as well as attempted murder charges against a second woman. Keeping, a 35-year-old from St. Jack's Coombs Cove, hasn't entered any pleas. 28-year-old Chantel John was killed in January. A Conception Bay South man accused of dangerous driving, causing bodily harm, as well as forcible confinement, testified at his own trial today. 23-year-old Joshua Steele Young was charged after the car he was driving crashed on Pitts Memorial Drive in March of 2017. Now, his former girlfriend, Morgan Pardy, was ejected from the car, leaving her paralyzed. Steele Young testified that he lost control after Pardy pushed his arm during what he described as a heated argument. In earlier testimony, Pardy said that she removed her seatbelt and asked to be let out of the car, and she said her ex ignored her request and continued speeding. Steele Young denies this. While Steele Young agreed that Pardy was harmed in the accident, he says his driving wasn't to blame. It cost more than $15,000 for a convicted child sex offender to attend his father's funeral in St. John's. Donnie Snook is serving an 18-year prison sentence for sexually abusing boys over 2 decades in Newfoundland and New Brunswick. We go now to the CBC's Carissa Donkin in Fredericton.
We don't know how long Donnie Snook stayed in St. John's this past winter, but we do know the trip cost Correctional Service Canada more than $15,000. That's according to records obtained under Access to Information. The expenses included almost $7,000 in overtime for the 2 correctional officers who supervised him and nearly $6,000 on flights. Snook stayed at a provincial jail in St. John's, but there were still hundreds spent on meals, a rental car, and hotel rooms for the officers. For the last 6 years, the former St. John's City Councillor has been in prison, serving an 18-year sentence for child sex crimes that spanned 2 decades and 2 provinces. He had 17 young male victims in New Brunswick and 1 in Newfoundland. After his father died in February, Snook was granted an escorted temporary absence from prison. Correctional Service Canada says inmates can be granted leave for compassionate reasons as long as they don't pose an undue risk to society. It's relatively common. More than 2,500 offenders were allowed to take escorted temporary absences from prison in the 2016-17 year. The John Howard Society says these absences are actually beneficial for public safety since they help prepare the inmate to live a crime-free life when they get out of prison. Now, Correctional Service Canada declined an interview request, but in an emailed statement said Snook may have to help pay back some of the expenses himself. According to the Parole Board of Canada, Snook waived his full parole review that was set for this year. His next full parole review is scheduled for April of 2024.
That's the CBC's Carissa Donkin reporting from Fredericton. More than 100 people woke up to a fire at their apartment building in Brook this morning. 138 tenants fled the apartment complex on Beothic Crescent early this morning when the brick building filled with smoke. Firefighters contained those flames to 1 unit, although a second apartment was damaged. 1 person was sent to hospital and treated for smoke inhalation. Dozens gathered in a church basement nearby where Red Cross volunteers handed out blankets as well as cups of coffee. When football players at a Halifax university hit the field this year, they'll be wearing high-tech helmets designed to analyze head impacts.
It doesn't detect concussions, it detects the impact that could lead to a potential concussion, and we're very proud of that technology.
Now, these new helmets for Dalhousie's football team have 5 built-in sensors to measure impacts, and if the helmets hit hard enough, the coach gets an alert and the player can be pulled off for assessment. It also lets medical staff track the impact of hits over a season. Now, these new helmets aren't cheap. They cost about $500 each, but Dalhousie's coach says you can't put a price on safety.
Well, the Labrador Straits has been plagued by disruptions to its ferry service and closures along the Trans-Labrador Highway this year. A third option to get into the area doesn't sound bad.
The road and all that would open the tourism so much more.
And that's just what they're looking at right across the border here in Quebec. I'll have more on that coming up on Here and Now.
This weather update is brought to you by the Healthcare Foundation Home Lottery. Order your tickets now at hcfhomelottery.ca.
Time now for a look at your weather forecast, starting with tonight. Now, if you're on the west coast of the island, it's been a pretty snowy day there today. Well, that's going to continue into tonight. Looking at about 2 centimeters still to come for the Corner Brook area, as well as some flurry action for the northeast coast and for the Avalon Peninsula. Pretty busy there up along Labrador's coast as well. About 2 to 5 centimeters of snow expected to come for Nain overnight tonight. And as we get into your look at your temperatures, around the freezing mark for most of the island. 1 degree in Port aux Basques, fairly clear skies with a chance of some flurries there. Moving up into Labrador, that mixed bag continues for Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Fairly chilly overnight tonight in Lab City with -9 as the overnight low. As we get into Thursday, things are going to continue to be fairly snowy for parts of the island. St. John's area could see some flurries and some showers in the morning and later into the day, and the southeast coast of Labrador as well could see that mix of flurries and showers. So this is a look at temperatures tomorrow, about 6 degrees for the Fairyland area and 3 for St. John's. So you can see that mixed precipitation happening there. A chance of some morning flurries for the central areas and the northeast coast, so that should start to clear off throughout the day. So you could see some sunshine as well, and a chance of flurries in the morning for the west coast as well, heading up into the Straits. That mixed bag there as well. We're looking at a chance of some flurries, maybe some showers there. Cartwright, a very messy day on the way there with 3 degrees as the high. For the rest of Labrador, Churchill Falls could see a flurry or two. Labrador City, though, fairly quiet with a mainly cloudy day. So as we get into Thursday night and Friday, it kind of continues with this flurry trend on the island for the Avalon Peninsula and Northeast Coast and for the southeastern portion of Labrador, and could see a flurry or two still continuing there. Clearing off, though, as we get into Friday later in the day, a mainly cloudy day coming on Friday, you can see there. So once again, that mixed bag for parts of the island. Temperatures getting up to about 8 degrees in Marystown on Friday, so that's not too bad. For Labrador, looking mostly cloudy for the central areas and over to the west, but continuing to be fairly messy in the Cartwright area. So now we're getting into the weekend. Friday night, a few little showers there and some flurry action and some shower action for western Labrador. But for the island, it's looking really, really nice. So could get up to about 8 degrees for the St. John's area tomorrow, or on Saturday rather. Grand Falls, Windsor could see temperatures upwards of 12 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud, 9 degrees in Corner Brook. And for most of Labrador, looking fairly nice as well, 5 degrees for Happy Valley, Goose Bay, but things start to turn for Labrador West on Saturday. So as we get into Sunday, everyone is going to get a good dose of some flurries and some showers. So it's going to be very nice on Saturday for the island, but then it's going to turn pretty nasty. And that's your forecast. Anthony, back to you.
Thanks, Carolyn. As you mentioned, Carolyn, of course, filling in for Ashley because we have our special show with the debate coming up right after here now, so stay tuned for that. It's been an isolated winter for the Labrador Straits. Disruptions to the ferry service, as well as closures along the Trans-Labrador Highway, have lasted for days at a time this year. And while the idea of a third link to that region is not a new one, it's gaining new life south of the border in Quebec. Here now is Jacob Barker with that story.
Where the Trans-Labrador Highway ends, Route 138 begins. The community of Blanc-Sablon, just a stone's throw from the Labrador border, its fate is tied with that of the Labrador Straits.
Right now, you can't do very much development because you can't get your products out.
Route 138 begins near Montreal and ends in Blanc-Sablon, but it's interrupted. A section between Kagashka and Old Fort, Quebec was never built. Several communities in the region have no road. For them, the medical center in Blanc-Sablon is only accessible by air. On the lower north shore of Quebec, communities are pushing the federal and provincial governments to build that stretch of road.
I think it's even more than beneficial. It's a necessity. At the point we are to right now with climate change and all that, I think this linking the communities together, it becomes essential.
It's not a new idea. Baudouin remembers her parents speaking about it, but says now's the time to put shovels in the ground.
We need a commitment from both levels of government, federal and provincial, to be able to have this road linking the whole coast.
And while communities here in Quebec have been pushing to get this route extended for quite some time, communities in Labrador are joining those calls. They'd like to see the road built as well.
About 700 kilometers away, the idea of another entry point into Labrador is well received. Municipal and provincial leaders here are on board. So is the tourism industry.
Investments in road infrastructure here are great news for us.
Right now, you can drive through 5 East Coast provinces. Connecting 138 means the potential for even more roadbound travelers. Fuel for positivity.
Then we're going to have a second loop, a faster loop through to the market. And I think that's going to change a lot of itinerary planning. It's going to open up opportunities for people in the accommodations business, food and beverage, for attractions and activities to cater to that increase.
Quebec's Plan Nord includes extending the highway, and there are some dollars set aside, but leaders on both sides of the border want to see a budget and a timeline for the project, and more importantly, action. Jacob Barker, CBC News, Blanc-Sablon.
Well, now to a story for you photographers. After a decade of stalking his prey and a month of camping out along the coast, a Natwashish photographer finally got the shot he was looking for. So check this out. Mark Newey was on a snowmobile trip when he spotted these 3 bears, although that's not a bear right there. Then he spotted this creature, and he says he was so excited he nearly dropped his camera. Now there you go, there are the 3 bears. Looking for a little blonde girl, but that's different kinds of bears. So there you go, imagine his surprise when then he spotted another creature on the ice. There you go, a rare one for Labrador, a massive walrus. Now the creature didn't seem too bothered, decided, all right, take a shot, I'm gonna lie down. And he just rolled over and went back to sleep. The 3 bears, polar bears, gorgeous.
Without a contract, you have nothing.
Ahead on Here and Now, the lowdown on how to choose the right contractor. Welcome back to the Here and Now newsroom. Tonight on the Lowdown, our CBC Investigate series about consumer news that you can use. We're going to take a look at home renovations and offer you some tips about how to pick a professional and get you some advice on what you really need to avoid. Here's the Lowdown from reporter Jen White.
If you are looking at renovating, it's important to do your homework before you let someone take a hammer to your home. Here's the lowdown on how to choose a contractor. The Federal Office of Consumer Affairs says you should ask family, friends, neighbors, and even local business associations for recommendations. You can also check with the Better Business Bureau for contractor ratings and complaints. Make sure to contact and interview more than one contractor. Always ask for references and check to see that they're valid. Also ask for a written estimate of all the costs associated with the project, including labor and any extra charges. If the quoted price seems really low or the contractor won't put it in writing, that should set off some alarm bells.
If you're engaging in a conversation with an individual who you want to do work with and they say, don't worry about a written contract, we'll work this out as we go, don't go down that road. You need to have things set out in the contract, and you want to understand what the scope of work is, the materials that are being used, the timing schedule, the payment schedule.
Belvin says for a small renovation, a one-page contract should do it. But the bigger the reno, the bigger the paperwork.
You will have peace of mind, and if there's a legal issue, you have recourse to take. Without a contract, you have nothing.
If it's not listed as your contractor's responsibility, check with your municipal building inspection department to see what permits you'll need for the job. Belvin says it's also important to contact your insurance company to talk about any extra requirements that might add to your bottom line. And you need to make sure your chosen contractor is covered under workplace health and safety.
There are professional renovators in our marketplace that have long-standing reputations, and they provide very good quality work and add value to your home. So make sure you're dealing with one of those legitimate businesses, because at the end of the day, this is the biggest asset that you and your family own, and you want to have that protected.
For a more detailed list of steps to take, contact the local branch of the Canadian Home Builders Association or check out their website.
Well, now to some new images which show just how destructive the flooding in eastern Canada has been. Look at this. This home in Ontario's cottage country down in the middle was knocked off its foundation, partially submerged in those floodwaters. And today, the Muskoka region is bracing for more trouble. Another 40 millimeters of rain is in their weather forecast. Now, CBC continues to track the devastating floods that are happening across 3 provinces, but we want to share a special moment that was captured yesterday amid all of this chaos. Now, this was shot by a CBC reporter covering the flooding near Ottawa. A resident let him use his property to launch a drone. While they were shooting, the man waded into the water and raised the flag. It's a touching act of patriotism amid much Canadian hardship.
Real person, good judgment, and yeah, mostly just I would settle for a real person at this point. My bar is that low.
Well, what makes for a good premier? A new series called Undecided tackles that question, and we'll take you to a visit to a bowling alley.
I'm Bailey White, and this is Undecided. It's a show about politics with no politicians. It's a show about an election campaign with no campaign promises. We're calling it Undecided because so many voters are undecided. Look at the polls, 30%, 40% of voters don't know who to vote for, don't know if it's worth voting at all, and a lot of them will stay home on Election Day. We're starting this series here at Plaza Bowl in St. John's, asking that question, is it worth voting? Who should you vote for? What's the point? By the end of the night, we hope to have an answer for you. So we'll start by thanking our guests for joining us, and maybe I can get you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Urquhart, and I live here in St. John's.
I'm Drew Brown. I'm editor of the Newfoundland and Labrador Independent, and I live here in St. John's.
I'm Vicky Mullally. I'm a comedian, and I also live here in St. John's.
So we will do a little bit of bowling later. So show of hands, is anybody a good bowler? Medium bowler?
Definitely not. I'm gonna have a lot of gutter balls, I can assure you.
I'll give you a run for your money on that.
What about a good voter? Like, Caitlin, do you always vote?
I always vote.
Yeah.
It's. I think it's really important personally.
True.
I mean, I've always voted. I've been, not necessarily because I think it's good to always get out and vote for, cast a legitimate ballot, but I mean, yeah, it's nice to go and at least register your protest if you don't want to vote for one of the real options.
And Vicky?
I've been guilty in the past of not paying attention when I was younger, but have since, yes, always have been voting in many recent years.
So how are we all feeling in the lead up to this election? Drew, you talk about registering your protest. Like, is that something that's on your mind this time around?
Me personally, yeah, I genuinely, I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for in this election. I'm not sure who's going to be running in my district, and yeah, there may not be a candidate for me to vote for or even protest vote for, so it's definitely something for me to think about.
Caitlin, do you know who you'll vote for already?
I don't know who I'm going to vote for yet. I always like to look at the policies and platforms before I make a decision.
Vicky?
I also am undecided. Just going to see whose views line up best with mine and where I want to see the province progress to.
I guess what got me thinking about this is, I don't see anybody out there right now on the campaign trail proposing any sort of radical change. Like, it's a lot more of the same, frankly, if I can say it that way, and look at different jurisdictions. Like, you look at what's happening in PEI right now with the Green Party, for instance, or you look at Ontario, whatever you think of Doug Ford, like, you have an opinion about him. Is that your feeling too? And anybody can jump in here and answer this. Do you have that this sort of just more of the same, nothing crazy going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is kind of a lack of leadership in some ways. Like, there's no one who's proposing, I mean, we don't know everyone's platforms and what they're going to be yet, but I don't foresee a lot of real radical change. In my view, the one party that often is proposing more radical ideas, the NDP, is unlikely to have enough seats to actually realize any of those ideas. So things like universal childcare and pharmacare and a housing strategy and those types of issues that tend to require more like systemic change aren't really sort of seeing the light of day. We're seeing a lot of small incremental changes in terms of platforms.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit ironic that the election sort of kicked off to be a contest of visions, because it doesn't necessarily seem like there is a contest of visions yet. I mean, the provincial government has its budget and its various plans and stuff, but all that sort of seemed to come together very recently in the last, let's say, month. There are still many unknown quantities in what the Liberals are proposing, but just as many as in what the Conservatives are proposing, and they're not necessarily even radically different proposals between the two. And like Caitlin's saying, the NDP is sort of on the ropes at the moment. The NL Alliance is also a very unknown quantity and will run a few candidates, but for the most, I mean, there are 40 districts in the province. Most of us, I think, won't have that many different things to choose from, especially if it's just Liberal and Conservative.
And Vicky, anybody particularly speaking to you right now?
I'm still pretty undecided. I mean, I'm trying to keep up with the news and see all the releases that are happening. it's important to me to see the potential increase in arts funding. The budget said it's going to be going up by $1 million, which is a great step in the right direction. Again, not a radical change, but definitely a step in the right direction. It's nice to see, but there's still a long way to go.
I mean, if it's as you say, Drew, like most of us in the different 40 districts won't have that many choices, won't have that much of a spread, I guess.
Yeah.
What is the point?
I mean, it's difficult, right? I mean, the classic low barrel argument was always, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain. I mean, in my experience, the Newfoundlanders' right to complain is inalienable, regardless of who you do or do not vote for. But yeah, I mean, in the case where there are probably going to be a few districts where it's going to be like a government incumbent, and then maybe the Tories will have somebody to run an opposition. Maybe it'll be a good sort of full-fledged candidate, maybe not. But at this point, I mean, the best you can do is just, I guess, like look at who's running, like who you have, and hope that there's somebody you can live with voting for, and if not, I don't know, I guess reconcile yourself to the fact that even if you don't like one of the options, somebody has to win anyway, and you're going to get stuck with a representative.
Then you end up with like what's the least bad option, you know? Yeah.
That's so discouraging, though. Like, it's, you know, people don't, and I find this is true too, that a lot of times people don't get voted in, they get voted out, right? Yeah. Like you vote, I can't stand looking at them anymore. Somebody else, I don't care who, anybody take a turn at it, right? But at least that's a feeling, as long as, more so than, yeah.
And I guess that sort of comes down to, like, again, that's less because, like, anyone's really giving us different ideas to choose from, and it's more like we have a couple different teams of managers, and after a while you get sick of one and you don't think they're doing a good job, so you want to switch things up and replace them with another set of managers. Yeah. But the projects don't ever change.
I mean, to what extent is that our own fault? Like, we do keep voting these people in. What if nobody showed up? You know, like, or I mean, nobody is coming forward with this radical idea. Do we get what we deserve?
I mean, I guess the one thing, and to Drew's point about the protest vote, is that if you don't show up and you don't vote, then your non-vote is registered as apathy rather than protest. Like, if you spoil your ballot, that's saying, I don't think either of these candidates or any of these candidates are suitable, I'm going to spoil my ballot. And that's registered, I think, as a protest rather than as just, I don't care, which ends up being a vote for the status quo by default.
So what would make that better, I wonder? But is it, you know, maybe they should show the list of spoiled ballots, you know? There was 100 for the PCs, 100 for the Liberals, and 100 spoiled. That would tell you something.
Yeah, or they should include, like, none of the above on the ballot or something. And if none of the above wins, you got to have a new election, maybe.
And, well, that's part of the idea of proportional representation and other forms of, like, alternative vote, is that you give people also, not only do you give them different ways to spoil their ballot, but you also give them ways to rank different candidates so that they can pick their favorite candidate, even if they think it's a long shot, if they think it's an underdog candidate, they can still choose that as their first, and then they can rank down for other candidates so that they also they have their least bad next alternative, right? You kind of create those options.
And so then it's not like a total Hail Mary, well, it's lost, no, but at least I stuck to my principles or whatever.
Yeah, and then you're less likely to get situations now where, like, let's say you got like 3 candidates running and it's a tight race, one person gets like 34% of the vote, then they win everything, and then the other 66 or whatever percent of people, their votes don't necessarily count, right? It doesn't, in the same way that if you at least got to rank your preferences, you would have a bit more of a say in, you know, who is your rep.
I want to talk more about what makes a good politician and why we get the kinds of candidates we do, but maybe we should take a break. So we'll take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about fantasy premiers. Welcome back to Undecided. I'm Bailey White, and it's time now for a game I like to call Fantasy Premier. I want to know what makes a good premier. What's a good quality to have? You know, think about it like a mystery date or dream date, blind date, whatever. Nothing weird, strictly political. But what would make a good premier? Somebody that you would want to say, I want to vote for them. Caitlin?
So, I mean, I think somebody who has good judgment, who's going to listen and understands how to consult with people, with stakeholder groups, and make sure that the voices of the constituents, and not just those who voted for them, but of all constituents, are heard.
Drew?
I mean, good judgment, definitely top priority. I would like a premier who is like a real person, who like if you ask them questions, that will give you like a real answer that a human being would say, and not necessarily like a robot filled up with PR textbooks. So for me, that's like top tier. Real person, good judgment, and yeah, mostly just I would settle for a real person at this point. My bar is that low.
Vicky, what do you think?
I agree with both of those for sure. Yeah, just be transparent. Talk to us like we're all adults. Just be straight up and listen to us. Yeah.
I just feel like that person would get voted out of office so fast. You want them to be honest? You want them to be normal? You want them to admit when they're wrong? Like, we don't reward that kind of behavior, do we?
Yeah, this sounds like less of a person we vote for, more of a person we like draft through a lottery system or at gunpoint or something. Yeah.
Be honest in combination with being a good person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's.
And I think like part of it though is having that integrity, and this goes with judgment, right? If you have strong like values and morals that people can understand and get behind, then you know that that's going to inform everything that they do. That's going to inform the way in which they behave as a politician, one would hope. And I think, I think that some of the challenge of what we've seen, for example, with Trudeau is that he was very charismatic and likable, absolutely, and had all these great ideas for massive change to the status quo. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen a lot of those things really moving forward, and so I think people get a bit disillusioned, and that, when you think about it, that's often what happens.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think it's like, and that's why I think like the emphasis on like the realness is so important, because it's not just like, honestly, I think like Newfoundland has had too many like unrealistically positive politicians where they'll just come out and say everything is great, it's the best, we're doing real good, everything's fine, please do not look behind the curtain. But like, even though we know like things are clearly not fine and like something is on fire back there, but if you keep coming out and telling us that like everything is good and we're the best, it makes it really hard to trust them. So like a politician that is like able to acknowledge they have maybe been wrong or made a mistake and like are capable of reflection and learning, maybe would be
You just automatically have so much more respect for that.
Yeah.
When someone can
Like-
just own up to, like, we're all human, we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
Just own it. And show how you're gonna fix it.
Yeah.
Plus, some mistakes are pretty obvious, and if you can call it like it is, that counts for something. Yeah.
Rather than like trying to let it blow over and then hiding and then like waiting 3 weeks and being like, well, something messed up might have happened, but it's still not our fault, which is the traditional way that politicians handle their problems in this country.
Fantasy premier would be someone we can compare to Robin Hood instead of Robin Hood Bay. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
Is there anybody like completely wildly, out of any kind of context, anyone that you would look at, Newfoundlander, Labradorian, or someone else completely fictional person, whoever, anybody that you would say, now that's somebody who would be a good leader of this province?
I think there are lots of people who would be excellent and who have all the skills and abilities to do it, but whether or not we can attract those people to engage in the dogfight that is the current politics in this province. We've seen the harassment scandals. We know, that the sort of sense of like, oh well, this is just the way it is. That the House of Assembly is supposed to be this horrific workplace, most people don't really want to sign themselves up for that. So I think we have to change the way we do politics in order to get any of those fantastic, incredible, ideal people to run.
Yeah, there's definitely a culture here that treats the like blood sport part of the politics as like not a bug but the feature, and like we like politicians that fight each other, and like, and, you know, like everyone will talk about, oh, things are so bad here, we need to change things, but like we also at the same time, like anybody who tries to say something like different gets like yelled at immediately. And then it's like called like a moron because they thought they might do something different. Like it's really like there's these two contradictory impulses. Like we're mad all the time about the state of things, but we're also mad at anybody who tries to fix it.
And we reward that bad behavior, right? Like if somebody acts like a baby, if somebody throws a fit and, you know, behaves like a child, that's rewarded, right? Because that's you're being a tough guy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's on all of us, I think. Like, we can't just say, well, those guys are getting on again. Like, we reward this kind of thing.
There's definitely, like, the more time I've spent at the House of Assembly and watching question period and stuff, the more I get this intense, like, flashback to, like, junior high gym class with the guys in the locker. It's definitely, there's, like, a very, you know, like, all right, these are the guys that would, like, take my lunch money all the time. Cool.
I mean, why would anybody want to be a part of that?
It's super exclusive of a lot of people, right? From a lot of different diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's a huge, and I mean, I think that we as voters need to think about our inherent bias. Unfortunately, when people think about what it means to be a leader, we often think about like an older white man.
Yeah.
And not intentionally, but it's so indoctrinated into us that that's what we think of. So we need to kind of rethink what leadership looks like.
Yeah. So I guess just sort of in closing, somebody's going to be premier. Any final thoughts? Like any last words to the premier, just to say, you know, in one sentence or two, what do you want?
I would like to see the economy be more diversified. I think we should be investing in tech companies. I've worked in the tech industry. I've seen the importance, the demand, and it's where the future is headed. I mean, yes, the oil and gas industry is huge here, and it's very important in Newfoundland. But I do think that we should be diversifying, and we can get a lot more intelligent people back to Newfoundland who want to be in Newfoundland, and we can benefit from value added from immigrants that are coming, and have specialized skills that we could be, you know, they could be adding value to our province that we love.
My only real message to the inevitably incoming premier would be, please take your job seriously. I know it's really tempting to not do that because nothing in our political system is set up to force anyone to take this stuff seriously if they're not taking it seriously, but like it's a pretty serious job, and we need somebody that can think not just about the next like 6 months or even next election or 2 elections. Like this is a historical moment. We need somebody thinking about the big picture and the long game, and not just like what things are going to look like in 2025, 2030, but like 2040, 2050, through the end of this century, that's going to see really dramatic upheavals to almost everything we know about the way our society functions. So yeah, I just want the premier to be aware of that and to maybe give some indication that they are aware of that. Yeah.
Kaylin?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously climate change and culture and our economy are really important pieces of any election platform. What I will be looking for is what I always look at, how our society treats the most vulnerable. So what is being done to protect and empower the most vulnerable and marginalized in our society? What do they have in place, or what plans do they have for pay equity? What are they thinking in terms of, there's been talk about regulating sex work in the province. I want to see that being done in consultation with sex workers and sex work advocates. And really, if we're going to be looking at these types of issues, we need to actually be looking at social determinants. If we want to take an exploitation frame, we need to make sure that people aren't vulnerable to exploitation. So that's talking about housing, that's talking about social assistance, that's talking about childcare. So if we make sure that people aren't vulnerable, then we can help prevent exploitation. And if we're not having that conversation and we're only talking about the reactionary fixes through criminal law and through regulation, then we're really not talking about how do we help the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. So that's what I hope, and that's certainly what I'm going to be looking for in every single platform. And if I don't see it, I certainly won't be voting for people who don't have that in there.
Lots of good advice for the Premier. I want to thank you all for joining me here at Plaza Bowl.
Thank you.
That's right. And thank you very much for watching. We'll be back in a couple of days with another segment of Undecided.
Welcome back. In a moment, we're going to get to one of the pivotal moments of all election campaigns. I've covered many over the last 25 years. Tonight's important because the parties will be polling overnight and making corrections for the rest of the campaign. So we'll see what the issues are and how they perform and try to convince you to give them their vote. So that's it for Here and Now tonight, but keep watching CBC, the 2019 Newfoundland and Labrador Leaders Media Debate. That's coming up next. Of course, you can check that out on our YouTube channel and Facebook Live as well. The debate is next. Thanks for watching.